Awesome. We are live. I'm going to probably turn on a little bit of welcome music. We'll give it like a minute or two for people to fill the room.
Does it show us on here how many people are in, Elliot?
Not on here, but I can keep you updated in the chat.
Does it allow you to load your own music in here too? So we could put in like, put some like Biggie in or something like that.
I mean, next time we are definitely doing that. This elevator music is great. We're at 23 people in, so I think we can kind of roll this down. Start. All right, awesome. Thank you everybody for joining. We are live. This is part one of our new series in collaboration with Oddit. It's called Anatomy of a Storefront. Today we're kicking off with menu and navigation, the very tippy top of a page, largely overlooked, but in my humble opinion, one of the most important parts of your website. Shaun, Taylor, thanks for joining me. You want to give a quick intro about you guys and what you do at Oddit?
Yeah, for sure. So for anyone that's not familiar with Oddit, most of our backgrounds are in brand and UX. So a lot of what we do is optimizing user experiences and websites for just removing friction points and trying to get people to check out faster. A lot of our recommendations revolve around simplicity and just design hierarchies, which is a lot of what we're going to kind of chat through in this session in particular. I think to Elliot's point, navigation is one of those things that's always kind of an afterthought. A lot of brands that we deal with, the navs are just essentially whatever Shopify has given them a template for, and it's like, okay, well, what do you want up here? And they put in their primary pages, and they kind of ignore the hierarchy side of it. And Shopify doesn't do a tremendous job of arming users with the information of how to best organize it or how to design that hierarchy of information. So hopefully in this session, we can kind of give you a lot of info on how to better do that. That wasn't a ton about Oddit, but I'll let Taylor, I'm one of the co-founders, and Taylor is one of my other co-founders, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference about Oddit, we get grouped into the CRO category quite often. And to be completely transparent, that's not our background. And when we first started Oddit, I didn't know what CRO stood. I thought it was Chief Revenue Officer. So when brands come to us and say, like, I've heard you guys are a great CRO agency, we like to quickly explain, like, we're not doing ongoing engagements where we're, looking at data, running tests and making assumptions. And not that that's wrong. I think that a lot of the brands that come in any size, sometimes they're not even ready for that type of engagement yet because the foundation of the store is kind of a mess. So we have brands that come in and say, we've been working with the CRO agency for 2 years and we just, don't see the needle moving. We go through the site and there's very, very basic kind of even best practice stuff being missed. So a lot of the data that they're using to get these assumptions from is kind of broken in the first place. So kind of having a solid foundation from not only just a conversion perspective, but a brand perspective nowadays is so much more important, especially with iOS changes and how difficult it is with Meta to get, super qualified traffic. Your site has to do such a better job of getting them across the finish line. And brand, on-site customer experience, not just CRO tactics with a lot of the brands we work with is super important. So that's kind of where we specialize in. We call it brand first CRO, which is really kind of just looking through, like, does this make sense? Is there friction here? Can we remove it? Is there enough trust? And we solve that through really good UX and UI.
Awesome. Yeah, so much of that resonates to me, which we can get to in a second, but really quickly, my name's Elliot. I'm the Director of Growth at Platter. For those of you that don't know, Platter helps brands build high converting storefronts. We are dispelling the myth that building a world-class storefront is going to cost you an arm and leg and take you like 8 months to build, and it's only reserved for brands doing many 8 or 9 figures of business. We think that you can do that at a much lower level. In our experience, what you said really resonates with me because a lot of brands are, let's call it like pre-experimentation. They're just fundamentally broken. Step one is not to experiment like small design changes here and there or move buttons around. It's really like, if you imagine they're a gas station, they don't have a cashier or they don't have snacks by the checkout. Like get those in place, get some business moving, and get to a point where you can really then kind of like fidget with the small details. Yeah, love the guys at Oddit. We'll get into the end with some cool offers that we can give to you guys. But let's crack into the content here. What role does menu and navigation play in the audits that you do for brands?
I think that the main reason, and just so everyone knows, most of our audits, we actually force our customers to audit their nav. By force, I don't mean that we force them to pay for it. We include it in every audit. And that's because it serves a multiple purposes. One, for a lot of customers and a lot of brands, it's the easiest way to visualize your sitemap, right? Obviously, there's a much larger sitemap of tertiary pages with everything from blog to whatever, but the actual hierarchy of your primary pages, that's done in your navigation. And it's just a really easy way to visualize that for brands. And so when we walk through that, it helps them understand how we think about hierarchies. And then obviously it's very beneficial because whether a user is coming to your site knowing what they're looking for or not, that's kind of priority number one, because if they do know what they're looking for and your navigation is set up properly, they can find it easy. If they don't know what they're looking for, your navigation needs to be set up properly so that they know what you sell. And I think a lot of brands get that hierarchy wrong. Whether it's desktop or mobile, they share most of the same traits, but I think that's kind of why we include it, is because that hierarchy of information and what we're surfacing in navigations, it's honestly driving a lot of what happens on site, right? It's establishing the precedent of here's what's most important, here's what's second most important, and here's the shit that honestly doesn't even need to be on your website aside from SEO. And so the main reason that we're doing that in every audit is to help brands set that baseline of and make a decision. What is the hierarchy of your products and what is the hierarchy of what you're selling?
Yeah. The more you force people to explore on their own, like you want to make people feel like they have that ability. But we see so many navigations that there's 17 items that there's really no hierarchy to them. They just want to show everything. They've got, things that should most likely be in the footer. Just cleaning that up. And it's another area to message what you do as well, right? Like you get, 100% of your traffic hits that homepage hero and sees navigation. It's not only your tagline and your, brand voice in that above the fold hero, it's everything else that's in the navigation that quickly can show what you do, what you sell.
I have 2 questions. I don't know if they kind of have the same answer, but like question 1 would be like, what are some mistakes that you see that are very common in setting up your menu navigation? And part 2 is there like a meta to this? Is there like a foolproof menu navigation, or at least one that is like 90% of the way there and changes about 10% brand to brand? Or like, how do you approach kind of like figuring out what needs to be in the menu and nav?
Yeah, I think actually the best way to answer that is to go into an example. So I'm going to start with one of our recent customers that I think is a good example that can answer those 2 questions. And then we can start diving in. I see Spencer submitted one. So I'll go really quick on this. And I'll show both mobile and desktop throughout this, but I think just to start, the reason that I'm going to show desktop first is just simply because it is much easier for us all to see. So as an example, when like to Elliot's first question, how do we define what's in here? So primarily dealing with e-commerce brands. So we're going to look at an e-commerce site. I think the main misstep that people take is, and this is not saying that this brand is doing something crazy wrong. This is consistent across almost every customer we deal with, but they treat the navigation as the catch-all for, hey, access everything you need to access on our site. And for me, that's what the footer is for. The footer is the catch-all. That's where all the crap that really doesn't matter that much or is secondary, let's say, can sit. So in this case, we've got a brand that has 2 products, a bundle product that's mini versions of them, and then a bundle product that's the normal version. So really it's 2 products, but let's just say it's 4 for this purposes of this. So if I'm sitting around, is the example we always give our customers, right? If I'm sitting around the boardroom with their leadership team or whoever's involved in this, and I said, what's the most important part to make client posts successful? It's selling products, right? That's priority number 1, selling those 2 products or those 4 SKUs. In this case, they've got those 4 products. 1, they're not even shown here. It's just 1 button. And it's taking up, we've got 6, so it's taking up whatever, 16% of their navigation. Pretty standard that the logo is home. So first thing I'm doing is removing that. That's, now we've got it taking up 20%. Contact, same thing. That's not a primary, unless you're, trying to generate sales leads or sales calls, like a lot of our SaaS customers, not a primary action. Footer. About us. Unless your product is so revolutionary from a product story standpoint, there's absolutely no reason to have about us up here. I guarantee there's nothing that interesting about, again, there's nothing against line posts. I haven't read the about page, but I would bet my life there's nothing that interesting about the founder or their story that is going to be a selling feature. If there is, then it needs to be a compelling link, not about us, right? I don't want to just know who the founder is and what their story is. That's not going to sell me the product. If there's a story behind how the product was created, why there's such a good use case, and how, like, if it's super unique and interesting, there might be a use case, but it's still secondary. It's still secondary to selling the products. So in this case, I would say footer as well.
And you can integrate, in this case, like I'm a little more familiar with this brand, there is a decent amount about the story and kind of why this is created. You can integrate this into other key areas within the customer journey that force people to do it instead of just, forcing them to click the About Us.
Yeah, like a lot of this stuff, right? About Us research, for instance, both of these probably have some value in them in selling the product, but do I want them going to those pages, or do I want them going to a product page and then hearing that story?
Yeah.
Right? It's probably the second. So this one in particular, they sell a lot in stores, right? They're in Sephora, which we see right here. So not fully knowing their sales strategy and how balanced they are between D2C and retail, this one is probably should be up here, right? Because they're probably saying, okay, well, do you want to buy online, or is there a Sephora at the mall next door to you? Find a store. So this one I would probably say find in store, or rename it. But again, still secondary. They are not in a retail store right now. They're on your website. The primary purpose of this website is to sell products. Secondary would be pushing them to a store to buy it. So same thing, it can be up here, but it's secondary. Research, depending on how robust this is, it's their blog. So again, not that important. So long story short, this nav, if we were to redesign it at Oddit, it would have all of this gone, and there would be 4 links up here, 3 links up here. There would be night serum would be a primary nav item up here. Sunscreen would be a secondary item up here. Again, we very rarely want to use the branded product name, right? If I just put unspotted in their nav, right? If it said unspotted and Ghostbuster, what the fuck are they selling, right? I have no clue. Use the product function as the title, not the product name. Your brand and marketing strategy is not working in navigations. It needs to be the function, right? This is a roadmap. It needs to be very clear and direct. So it should say, sorry, going back here. So it should say up here, night serum, sunscreen, bundles, right? There's 2 bundles. And then secondary action, find in store. Research, about us, contact should be in footer, and home should be gone. So all of those changes, we've now got a really focused navigation, focused on what they're actually selling, without going to click to another page, they have all the product SKUs and they understand what you sell, skincare, immediately, because you've got the serum and you've got sunscreen. This, I'm in Canada, so it's saying Canadian, very important, but very similar to a lot of the stuff we're saying here. It's all about hierarchy. Why is this so long? This could just be a small, tiny Canadian flag with a chevron, that little point arrow downward, and be 20% the width, right? Search can be super powerful for brands, and in general, brand customers that search convert higher. But there's a threshold, right? Like, do I really need to search for 2 product SKUs? Right? If they're here to learn about skincare, sure, but that's not why they're on your website. And that's not why we want them on your website. All that content is SEO. So if they landed on one of those, great. But this search, to me, wasted space. And all they're doing is clicking there, potentially searching and getting something that they weren't looking for, or getting the same 4 products they would click from shop. So logo, 3 product links, find in store, Canadian flag, cart. All those changes, we have a more focused nav. We have them directed directly at products as fast as possible. We're skipping the collections page because, to be honest, this brand should not have a collections page, and that's part of our audit recommendations on this. If you have this view of SKUs, your nav can act as the collection page. There's no need for this middle space. There's no need for this. If I'm in the nav, I should be clicking on night serum and it should take me right to the product page. This is just a wasted click, right? Because they're not finding anything out about the products. So we've tightened it up. We've got them directly to the product pages from nav. They know what we sell. We've removed all the tertiary actions that don't need to be there. We've removed search. And it's the same on mobile. We always start with desktop just because it's easier to, I don't know why it's doing that. See if we can get that to fix. There we go. It's the same thing. We're just taking that same hierarchy and redeveloping it for this format, right? So in this case, we have a little bit higher canvas. So it could be actual product cards, right? A night serum product card, sunscreen product card, and then a link to bundles. Contact, about, stores, research, all secondary. By secondary, I mean they just look less important. Right? So maybe the products are cards, these are text. If you really wanted, you could have a primary action at the bottom. In this case, it's tough because I don't really want them going to a shop all page, because again, that collection page shouldn't exist. So it could be shop bundles, it could be a quiz to figure out, which one's best for them. But again, 2 products, what's the result of the quiz going to say? Buy our 2 products. It's not, yeah. You might want to fill that space with a testimonial. But the overall goal is just give them a hierarchy that makes sense for you, right? What are you trying to sell? You're trying to sell the products, not your story necessarily, until they get to the product page. So I don't remember the exact 2 questions, Elliot, but I think that answered them both.
Hey, Shaun, Elisa has a good question here because it comes up a lot is, brands have their own, business and product structure as well. And especially even just like, let's say that they've got a ton of inventory in something, or they're on the unit economic side, they want to push something a little harder than the other. In that case, is that something that they would work with the nav? Like let's say they've got a ton of inventory in something they want to push that they got great margins on. It's just kind of a balance of what you want to push, right? Do you want to convert higher? Do you want to push more products? One great way to figure out how people are using your site, and we don't do this, but working with companies like heat map, or having Microsoft Clarity, or any kind of heat mapping software, right, where you can kind of just see where people are moving throughout the site. If you get a ton of action on the 4th nav item to the right, maybe it's worth moving to the left. So you can get some assumptions from that. Using those tools. Again, they're assumptions, but you can get some pretty good details and run some pretty good tests on that. But at the start, don't overthink it. If you've got frequently asked questions from customers and they're asking about a specific product or something specific all the time, you can use that as, really good data to show things a little more clear. whether it's in your nav or higher up on the page.
Yeah, and in this particular case, it's not as important because there's only 2 products and 4 SKUs, but 2 products. So there's no reason to not surface all of them in that navigation. But yeah, if you're seeing customers constantly pick, let's say it's like a huge, IKEA, whatever, tons of nav items. If the furthest right one is always the highest clicks from a heat map standpoint, move it to the left for sure, right? People, at least in English, are reading top to bottom, left to right. So if they're going to miss anything, it's going to be on the right. If they're going to miss anything, it's going to be on the bottom. So most important products on the left. And in this case, we don't recommend it because there's only 2 products, but the best way to surface what people are always looking for is best sellers, right? Yep. Whatever people are buying the most, that's the only data point I give a shit about. I don't care what the team thinks is most important. What is selling the most? What is the best seller? That's what's most important to the customers. So that should be on the left, right? If this had more than 2 SKUs, let's say they had 10, there would probably be multiple product drop downs, and then to the left of them, a best sellers tab, because the easiest way for a new customer to figure out what they want to buy is to see what other customers are excited about, and that's best sellers.
Yeah.
I think I can introduce like a principle that's true in this episode of the series, but it's going to go everywhere. And I'd like to get your thoughts on it as well. Is like a mistake that a lot of people make is that your website is a sales object. It's not a marketing object, right? So marketing's role is to get you to the website. If you're getting there and then you're continuing to do a bunch of marketing, so these kind of like not sales-based pages like about us and research and our story and stuff like that, that's not the place for you to do that. Those are like marketing's role in the content you're creating, the ads you're running, stuff like that, the partnerships you have, whatever. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, of the principle of like your website is a sales machine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to that first point of just like at the end of the day, a lot of the content might be marketing focused and marketing the brand and marketing the story, but that's not, in a navigational standpoint, that's not the stuff we want to direct them at. It's all product focus. It's all focused on how many clicks in that navigation go directly to revenue, right? And that's the key point with removing that collections page, right? Like we want them focused on getting the fastest path to revenue with all the info they need. If that collection page is providing a ton more info that they weren't going to get on the product page, like seeing all the products in a grid and comparing, sure. But our nav does that because they only have 2 SKUs. So it just tells me, okay, we don't need it. Does that answer it?
I think too, Shaun, just, I used to work in radio a lot, which is dating me, but the whole job of, marketing in general is getting people in the door. The salespeople take over once they're in the store, right? So if you think about your website and they've already got enough interest from the ad to get to the store, you can just be very clear. And like, think about if you're walking into let's say a golf store, right? And the sales rep comes up to you and is just hammering you on everything. You're like, ugh. The same thing if they're just coming up to you and telling you general marketing stuff about everything. You want to the sales rep's job is to kind of, hey, I'm here if you need me. Let me help you explore a little bit. So that's kind of like the content on your site, whether it be nav, whether it be, homepage hero. Like, we should really get to the point here. And this isn't nav related, but the biggest thing we see wrong on most sites, big, small, anything, is you get to the site and they keep using marketing jargon. They're not clear, and no customer is going to come to your site and be mad that you just spoke clearly and simply to them, because that's what they're there for. They're not trying to get marketed to anymore. So whether that's nav, product page, homepage, like, just think about it like an actual brick and mortar store and the experience that you want when you walk into one of those.
Yeah. I'm going to go on to the next one now. And Elliot, maybe just keep us at 4 to 5 minutes max, and we'll try and go through as many as possible.
Cool.
Ace or Durjoy, you had a question about should a product collection page exist for SEO? I'm not necessarily saying it shouldn't exist. I'm just saying it shouldn't exist in the navigation in this case. So it can still exist. I just don't think there's a ton of use cases from the nav that they need to be accessing it.
Yeah.
Okay, Smoking Gun Coffee Roasters from Spencer. So very similar kind of comments on this one. I'm guessing because they actually have a cafe, that it's probably a smaller coffee brand, because it looks like we have one cafe. That's not like a knock or anything, just saying that the cafe is probably pretty important. So it probably makes sense to leave that up here. One thing that a lot of brands sleep on is using your nav as information. Whenever you're looking at stuff like this, hours and location, for example, this might not be the right answer, but some of that stuff can be here, right? Like, does this need a page? Or could I say open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. and a link to the address, right? Because that's all they want is the Google Maps link. It probably doesn't need a page, right? Menu, that probably needs a page. I'm not going to put the whole menu in the nav, but there's certain elements in this dropdown, excuse me, that probably don't need their own item. It could also be up here or in a secondary part of the nav and just say hours, location, and then this menu item is our cafe menu.
Yeah, I would say that the only thing I would say on that is this brand's pretty freaking cool. I love it. If the cafe was like a landmark that everybody knew, and we have a client, Mollusk Surf Shop, if people are familiar with it in California, their stores are really cool. So it kind of sets a tone to the brand. So like, if this had a really cool atmosphere and people all knew about it, then maybe the visual of the cafe would set the tone for the brand as well. And there could be a use case there, but it seems like it's just kind of showing people that the cafe exists in the menu. So it's not as important.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, just like the brand story, right? There's a case that could be made that that store being beautiful can be better weaved into the site experience than the navigation or its own page. From the shop side, I would personally, same thing, I would move pretty much all the about links into the footer, and I would break this out into 3 primary nav items: whole bean coffee, or just say whole bean so that it's not so wide, instant, and then more. And I would just include these 3 in a more tab. So it would say whole bean, instant, more, and that more dropdown has these 3. Those heading links just take you right to these pages. And wholesale, I'm guessing, like a lot of coffee brands, this is an important factor for generating sales, probably deserves to live up there. But same thing, they can't buy wholesale on site. Primary purpose of this site is selling coffee online. Secondary is wholesale. I'm just making that assumption. If that's the case, wholesale can be up there, but maybe it just has a little lighter weight font, or it's a different color, or you're trying to create a visual hierarchy, right? So here's the 3 products you can buy on here, the 3 primary categories. Here's our cafe or our menu. Here's, wholesale access. The other thing a lot of brands don't necessarily do well is having a primary action. So maybe there's one thing that's like, we actually do really, really want more wholesale accounts. Add a button here, right? Like, looks like orange is a secondary color for them. Add a big orange button here. Apply to carry in my cafe, or apply to be a wholesaler. Or maybe it's whole bean coffee. That's what they want to push. That primary action, there's no right answer. It's whatever you want to push the most. It's the loudest thing in your nav. And so that can be really helpful here. A lot of the coffee brands we deal with have a quiz, right? Helping customers figure out which coffee am I going to like the most. It's really hard to figure out which coffee is best for them from these visuals, right? So getting some ideas of the types of coffee they drink, how much they drink, do they like darker, medium, or light roast? What are their favorite flavor profiles? That can help surface a lot of stuff. So a quiz could be helpful here. Search, probably pretty useful here because they do have quite a few products, as you can kind of see here. And so anything that they're not finding up here, it could be really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm guessing mobile is the same. What's my time at, Elliot?
You have 1 minute.
Okay. Same comment as before. Start with reorganizing that desktop nav because it's just much easier to visualize. and then adapt that updated hierarchy into this one. In this case, we probably wouldn't have product cards like the other one because there's a lot more SKUs. The other one was easy because it was only 2 primary SKUs. In this case, it would just be those coffee links, right? So whole bean, instant, more. Those are my primary links. Those are larger text. Maybe they're twice the size of these. And then these secondary actions are down here and they're just smaller text. And then if you have a primary action, you can put it down here.
Yeah, that's so key is talking about design hierarchy, because the content is one thing and how you're structuring things, but you can do a lot of things with the correct design, right? Font weights, colors, everything like that is so important and often overlooked because a lot of brands we work with are founder led. They don't have a ton of design experience. They get their theme and they start, just plugging in different types of content and not thinking about like, what if we just made this font weight a little lighter so it wasn't as prominent and this one a little heavier, a little larger. So thinking through those things and having somebody that understands UX, UI design from a conversion perspective is really important.
Yeah. Okay. I hope that was helpful, Spencer. Going to move on to the next one.
Really cool brand, by the way.
Yeah. The packaging looks awesome. Jacob. Okay. Nature City. So one thing we haven't commented on yet in Navs is this announcement bar. So a few things here. Going back to that hierarchy. So let's just say that they've landed on this homepage from an ad and you've got 1 click, maybe 2 from them. Is this the click I want them to take? This little carousel? Probably not, right? Secure checkout, fast support. Those are great items, like traits to have in a brand, but it's so expected from like a brand standpoint. Like if you're operating online and your checkout isn't secure, it sounds bad, but like if you're stating that checkout is secure, it just gives me a red flag that it probably isn't. It sounds like someone trying to cover for something. So like there's ways to tastefully do that in checkout, but I feel like up here, it's just wasted content. The shipping offer and the 1-year money back guarantee, that's pretty enticing. A lot of brands, when they put stuff up here, they'll link it, but this one doesn't, which is good because you don't want to link to these things, right? A lot of brands will say free shipping, and then you click and it takes you to a shipping page where it explains their free shipping. If I need an explanation for these 4 words, you have a bigger issue with your shipping, right? Free shipping over $69 is extremely clear. There should not be additional explanation needed, right? If it's for all of the states in the US except Alaska, don't take them to a shipping page for that. Just let them find out in checkout. It's not something we need to touch on here. So long-winded way of saying, if you're not going to have an action, if you're going to have an action here, make it something that's a little more enticing, like free shipping over $69 and then shop all or shop bestsellers. Maybe this second carousel, if you do have a carousel, is where you put 1-year money back guarantee. Same thing, action, shop bestseller, shop all, whatever maybe it's this primary product. But I think there's a multiple ways to approach that. Main thing trying to communicate there is give them an action that is taking them to shop. Never take them to a secondary page. And this site's not doing it, but I just thought it was a good opportunity.
And also too, with that notification bar, make sure you understand what you're presenting on per page, right? Like you can, like what you're saying in that notification bar on a home page should be different than your product page. Like fast free shipping, returns or whatever on a product page makes a little more sense because that's usually when people are ready to buy, right? They need those kind of intricacies of things. And on a homepage, pushing a special or pushing something to get into the shop is probably more important. So we see a lot of brands just blanket the notification bar and it's the same on every single page. You can really kind of utilize that to be very specific for, page-based shopping.
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm going to refresh because I screwed this up by changing my screen size. So I'm not going to comment on this stuff because I think in this case, there's quite a few products. So search definitely makes sense. About us, probably not worth having up there. What is interesting though is 22 years. So not a nav thing, but something that, just to note, that's a huge social proof thing. Most customers aren't business owners likely, but they likely understand that keeping a business afloat for 22 years in this space is extremely difficult. So they're not thinking of it that way, but it's a huge trust builder, because keeping something sustaining that long, whether it's online or in retail or wherever, that's a huge milestone, right? That takes either a really smart team or a really great product or both. So having that across your site as a social proof point is important. Not in your nav necessarily, but just a note for where that should live. One thing to note here is there is a lot of products. I think because of that, we probably wouldn't break these out into their own nav items. However, I think what you could do here is have 2 shop actions, one to shop by product type and one to shop by the result or the need, right? So shop by need, let's say, just for lack of a better word. And when that drop down comes, it's showing joint and bone, digestion. Even if these 2 headings have very similar drop downs, letting them shop by these items, right? What the result is, joint and bone health, digestion, urinary health, it can be a really nice jumping off point. Whereas if they just see shop, they may not click on it. So I would probably break this into 2 headings. I would not have about us. And for specials, the main thing to note here is whether it's specials, whether it's sale, whatever the offer is, it looks like 20% savings. Just have that right here. Like save up to 20%. Something that says like specials is enticing, but specials and knowing exactly how much they can save. If it's 5%, maybe don't advertise it. But if it's in that 10, 15, 20, some brands have products on sale they're trying to clear out that are like half off. Calling that out, you're going to see instantly more action on that, because they have an expectation already of how much they can save, and you're kind of guiding them into that area, knowing what to expect.
Shaun, we do have time for one more brand, and then we might have to switch over to Q&A, because I know people will have some questions.
Okay. I'm just going to scroll through here and grab one at random. So I apologize if you were the next person after that one. All right. How about Caitlin from Ledbury? Okay. All right. So first thing I see is they have quite a few products. So a lot of different shirts and other clothing. Made to order. This is a super nice drop down for this, because it gives them a lot of details without necessarily making them click through. Same comment here. Like up to 50% off. If you put in, even instead of sale, save up to 50%, I would be blown away if you didn't see a ton more clicks on that. Just because you're setting the tone of how much they can save, because it's such a big offer. Even if some of them, not all of them are, it's still a huge offer. And yeah, you don't always necessarily want to be pushing the sale items, but if you're trying to clear out the stock, and maybe it's a new customer that hasn't tried the product before, it's a really great access point to the brand for them trying a product for the first time. So I think being louder about that would be really helpful. They've done a good job of not having a bunch of secondary crap up here. Like I said, in the first few brands, this space is for sales. What products are we selling? And everything here does that. So I think that's done really well. I think with this many products, this is a perfect use case for having bestsellers up here. So bestseller should be right here next to new. The other thing that I would say on this one is a lot of brands don't give users enough information in search. So let's just see what happens when I say, so they've got a nice autofill as I start to type, which is great. But one thing that they're not doing is surfacing anything immediately. So as soon as I click this field should say, search over 100 shirts and pants and whatever you want to describe the overall product category. So you're giving them, first off, how many products they're searching across, right? Is it 10,000? Is it 4? Is it 100? Giving them most popular searches or jumping off points to primary categories, right? Like maybe they're really well known for these dress shirts. When I click here, there should just be quick tags, dress shirts, whatever the most popular categories are. And then there could also be product cards, right? This could be expanded down here, and there could be product cards for their best sellers or the 50% off sale. It's almost like a secondary navigation, right? It's not just search. A lot of users know what they want and they're going to search for it. But if they click here and they don't, give them somewhere to go. Don't waste that click, right? Because those little tags or products or categories you're surfacing could be what drives them into a product page or a collection. Everything else makes sense though.
Hey, Shaun, I'm going to drop just a site for reference of a good way to, in the navigation, to say sale. Kehuko, one of our clients, does a good job there. So like with his Ledbury site, they could apply something like this with their brand colors as well.
Yeah, right up there.
But just, you can see how it's much more enticing than just having sale.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to the brand as well, right? Like not every brand wants to push that sale because they're likely lower margin. But I think for new customers, like I said, I think it's a really great way to get them in the door and get some products at a reasonable price and then become kind of brand advocates once they get it.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if your brand has a great lifetime value and you've proven that getting first order is the most important. You've got a awesome, email retention team. That's important to get the first sale through the door.
Yeah.
Shifting gears from the stores that we're looking at over to FAQs, I selfishly am going to throw mine in here. What are your opinions on mega menus and like what function do they really serve?
I think there's a few things. So very similar to that comment we made about the location and the hours of that cafe. I think mega menus can be kind of two purposes. One, they're kind of that table of contents drop down that's showing just everything in a category. It can also be a communication tool, right? Where you're communicating a little bit more about what's on that page to stop them from going there if it's not what they were looking for, or to push them to that page because it's a great selling feature. That Ledbury site did a good job, right? That made to order drop down. It was different than all the other mega menu items for all the other products. It was a sales tool. They were using it to market made to order and what makes that unique. Yes, they could communicate that on the page, but it's a great middle point to add some communication about it in case it's not what they were looking for, and you're not wasting that click through to a page where they might not come back. I think the biggest benefit is just giving you more visual space, right? The primary nav is 1 to 2 words max on every item, and you're trying to communicate as clearly as possible, right? You're removing that brand nomenclature, like in the lion pose example, we're saying what is the product, not what is it called from a brand standpoint. You're trying to be as clear as possible. That drop down is where you can give a little more info and context and make sure that they're going where they intended to go. That's the number one thing. I don't want people using a nav, clicking on something, getting to a page, and realizing it's not what they thought they clicked on. And so mega menu's main purpose is communication, right? I want to make sure that whatever they're clicking on It's super clear where they're going, and where they end up is exactly where you told them they were going to end up. And so it's more so just a bigger canvas to communicate. And there's multiple use cases for it. The most common is just unlocking that Rolodex of whatever's below that category, right? But I think that made to order example and many others, it can also be almost like an interim page in some senses.
Yeah.
Very clear. Are there any other questions from anybody?
One thing in the meantime too, while we're waiting here, is I guess we should probably explain how Oddit and Platter can kind of work together as well. So, you can come to Oddit and we can, do a full audit conversion redesign of those key pages. And that's kind of usually what we tell people to do. Is having us look at your About Us page is probably not of value. We can make it look pretty, but using a template is probably fine. If we get the audit done, we deliver all the design files to our clients. So you get all the Figma files for anything we've redesigned. You can take that over to Platter, and they can get that built out. They can get you onto the platform in pretty record time at some pretty low costs. And they can go into kind of like all of their benefits of what they've built into their platform. But it's a pretty easy way to just say, like, especially if you're, going to Shopify 2.0 or you're coming from somewhere else, like, it's a really good option to just have a one and done, like, conversion redesign, get your foundation of the store great, and then also have it on a platform that is super fast. It's got a ton of features that are built in, so you can, cut out a lot of the apps that you're paying for and customer service hours that you're dealing with all these different people. So just so everybody knows kind of how we can work together is probably important.
We got a last one that we can probably run through before we call it time. Thoughts on continuity between landing pages, branded site, and tap cart?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the nature of landing pages and at least how most brands approach it is because they're usually done really quickly. They're usually done at a lower cost than maybe a page built on your website. The nature of that is they likely will have some inconsistencies between the site. I think the continuity is really important. You don't want someone going to a landing page, getting excited about the product, and then they leave and all they remember is your product name. So they come back to the main site and it doesn't look the same. So keeping that consistency is really important. I think the number one thing that the best brands in the world do, and the ones that are still around 22 years later, like the one example, is consistency, right? Whether it's in the product they're selling, whether it's in their marketing and language, whether it's in customer service, consistency is what builds long-lasting brands. And that's no different from an aesthetic standpoint. When I see a landing page that looks completely different than your branded site, it just tells me you're lazy. I don't mean to be direct, but like that just tells me you aren't willing to put in the effort to make it as consistent as possible. And yeah, that can sometimes be a money thing, right? Landing pages aren't as expensive and you're trying to launch as many as possible. But there are solutions to help you build out templates that are aligned more with your website. And then the other thing to factor in there is the purpose of landing pages is a really specific targeted audience or a targeted campaign or a targeted product. So it really depends on what did the ad say, right? If the ad communicated points 1 through 3, and now you only have to communicate 4, 5, 6, it's okay for that landing page to not tell the whole story because the ad set them up for it. That's the whole point of a landing page. It's to finish the story from the ad. And so it's not important that the product page you land them on a landing page is exactly the same content as the primary site. It's more that it feels cohesive. I think landing pages just serve a really amazing purpose in terms of letting brands test things that maybe they don't want to mess with their primary site. So I almost look at it as like a training ground, right? You're trying things that maybe you don't want to do on the primary site or new things that the team came up with. Test them on a landing page, see if they work. If they do, cycle them into the main site. The things that don't, put them in the trash, right? And just keep testing that. It generally works a lot better than making updates to the primary site and then just, hoping that it's going to work. So long-winded way of saying that continuity is very important, but there is
On the flip side, I would say brand continuity is important always. And if like you haven't had like a brand guidelines or something built out that you can share with designers or whatever, just to keep those specific brand consistencies throughout, that doesn't mean that your landing page has to be exactly the same. The landing page gives you that opportunity to, let's say you have customers from like 19 years old to 65, right? There's a lot of brands you work with that have a wide range. It's very difficult to speak to all of those people on one site, right? Whereas with landing pages, you can change a little bit of that content, even sizing, right? Like your font sizing can go up for older demographics that you're targeting ads towards. Colors can be more masculine, more feminine, but fonts, your actual visual identity, those types of things, that's what's going to make people remember your brand. So if you don't have a proper, brand guidelines or brand book built, that's something that I would recommend, especially in a digital atmosphere, not just specifically for anything to put on a shirt, to put on a billboard, but digital brand guidelines, proper logo use of a horizontal and a vertical. So something I would definitely recommend. Don't spend a ton of money on it, but we do them at Oddit as well. When we do a lot of audits, we'll do digital brand refreshes. We'll do brand books for people so that they can pass that to whatever media buyers, UX agencies, developers, and at least they have those rules to stay consistent.
Awesome. Well, this is an absolute blast. A couple things. We have links to both Platter and Oddit in the comments. I believe that Taylor left some cool information about some special offers for you guys. We're going to be sending the recording out to everyone who attended as well. So look out for that in your inbox. And then we'll be doing a new episode hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Taylor and Shaun, for the awesome content, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it, man.